Hi there. Welcome into SEC Nightly. I am your humble host, Brooks Austin. SEC Nightly is the nightly show dedicated to the top news and notes from the nation's top conference. Not going to waste any time tonight. We've got a fully loaded show tonight. We're going to be going through ESPN's latest article of a way too early top 25. But along within that article, we're going to go through these 7 teams from the SEC. That's right, 7. Over half. I don't know why I held up 9 there. 7 over half of the conference, just at half of the conference, ranked within the way too early top 25 across the AP poll. So we're going to hit in that, and we're going to do it with a very well-qualified young man, and that's Zach Goodall, my buddy from the Gator Maven. So we're going to be mixing the Bulldog Maven and the Gator Maven here on SEC Nightly. That is what we're going to do. So we're going to bring Zach in right now. Zach, my man, how you doing tonight, brother?
I'm doing great, man. Really appreciate you bringing me on. I'm looking forward to a lot of these.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is what the platform is for, right? To get guys like me and you on this interface, on this platform that we have, and use it to talk about what we know, right? Which is SEC football and SEC sports in general. So if you guys have a team, whether it is, the Georgia Bulldogs or whether it is the Florida Gators, or whether or not you just want to find out the latest information on your enemy, it is very, very important to know your enemy, know what's going on down there in Gainesville and in the Florida area, and that's what Zach Goodall's doing over there at the Gator Maven. But, Zach, like I talked about, we've got a big show planned for tonight. We got a lot to go through, and we're going to go through one by one each of these 7 teams that was listed in the top 25 here in the way too early polls. And we're going to start with Alabama, and I don't know about you, Zach. I'll give you the floor first. Are you ready to throw a little dirt on the Alabama grave? Are you ready to say that great dynasty is at its near end?
Well, you can never totally sleep on Nick Saban, obviously, and what he's able to do from a recruiting standpoint, a coaching standpoint, the whole 9 yards, like the bread and butter of what makes football work, especially college football. So much like Tom Brady, for as long as he's been going, as much as I've loved to hate him, I can never sleep on Alabama at the end of the day, especially being a Jacksonville guy. I went to a bit of a rival school of Mac Jones, but I've got to pull for the dude at this point.
Yeah, I mean, at this point for me, the moment you start seeing Alabama lose games that they shouldn't, right? I know they struggle in the Iron Bowl. I know they specifically struggle there on the plains in Auburn, especially when that Auburn Tiger team is ranked under Nick Saban. I believe he's 0-4 against at least a top 10 Auburn team. When Auburn's good and Alabama goes into Jordan-Hare, they typically lose. That's been the track record of Nick Saban. But more or less, until I see Alabama lose a game that they shouldn't, until I see them lose at home to Tennessee, or see them lose again on the road and make it a habit to lose to teams like Ole Miss, not just the occasional upset. That's going to happen in the SEC. Until I see repeated, losses where you're like, Alabama lost to them, that football team lost to them, I'm not ready to throw dirt on the grave. But they do lose a lot of guys, particularly on the offensive end. Zach, you lose Ruggs, you lose Judy. Jedrick Wills, the great offensive tackle there. That's a key loss at right tackle. And, of course, Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback, entering the draft as well. How do you think it plays up? Do you think Mac Jones can live up to the production that we saw for the last couple of years with Tua at quarterback?
Well, Tua is an incredibly special talent, so I don't want to put that type of expectation on Mac. Maybe it'll come somewhat naturally from fans when it gets to Tua's brother. But, I mean, when Matt came in, there were some bumps in the road at points, but honestly, you can't help but feel pretty good for the dude. He came in and got the job done, to the ability of the standard backup quarterback. Not everyone, at least, I can say this from my perspective, not everyone's going to come in and do what Kyle Trask does. Mac Jones wasn't going to come in and beat Auburn. He wasn't going to beat LSU. And it wasn't going to happen. He wasn't going to go in and beat these top teams at the top of the conference like Tua has been able to do, what they're going to expect out of Tua's brother whenever he is able to come in and start full time. So, you've got to hope that there's going to be a lot of growth from Mac entering another year where maybe he will end up being the projected starter. But I just don't want to throw those expectations on him yet.
No, I think that's fair. And what I do think is that, people will use that Auburn game and they're like, hey, Mac Jones put up 45 against a really good Auburn defense. But what I will tell you about that is there is some weapons on that football team that are now gone. I know Jalen Waddle had his game in that football game. Jalen Waddle went for about 250, it seems like. And yes, he will be back along with Devontae Smith on that offensive end. But losing Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs specifically are a big loss there on that offense. So, and defensively, they lose a ton of guys in their front seven. You know, Raekwon Davis is gone. Anthony Jennings is gone. Terrell Lewis is gone. Xavier McKinney out of the back end, gone to the NFL as well. But, you know, that is the traditional storyline. That's a perennial storyline at the University of Alabama. I think I counted them in 2019. They sent like 17 guys to the league. So in 1 year. So and Georgia's put 19 in the league since 2016. So it's just astronomical, the number of talent and the amount of talent that they have there. But that is a direct result of recruiting. We spent way too much time on Alabama. Now let's get into the national champs. Pre-ranked number 4 in this ranking. Now let me ask you this, Zach. A lot of turnover there at LSU. You lose a ton of guys, mainly that Heisman Trophy winner at the quarterback position, and one specifically really good wide receiver and a tailback. Now, is this just a courtesy to LSU to even put them number 4 in this ranking? I know that sounds like, you know, kind of a harsh statement, Zach, but it's kind of true if you really think about it.
I mean, I would definitely agree with you there at this point. And we were just mentioning it, like a team like Alabama, like, yeah, the expectation is for them to be able to turn over the roster year by year and get it done. We haven't seen Ed O do that. We haven't seen Dan Mullen do that. We've seen Kirby Smart do it probably better than most people within the conference other than Nick Saban, but there's no proven guy out there like Nick Saban that can consistently do it and have teams winning championships. And that's going to be the test. That's going to be the threshold for Ed O in this cycle, is how does he replace Joe Burrow and Justin Jefferson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Joe Brady and the defensive coordinator, and suddenly like I've got to go on to
DJ Mangus, the offensive analyst as well. I mean, it's everybody. They're all gone. I mean,
like you got to count on like multiple hands just how many guys are gone. Like this will tell us a lot about who Ed O is as a coach.
Yeah, typically you get like 2 or 3 years with your one congruent staff. Like Kirby Smart didn't until year 3 have guys start getting picked off of his staff. Now, I understand LSU went off and won a national championship in year 2 under Ed Orgeron, but typically this, hey, let's go raid the locker room there at LSU and pull their staff, doesn't really happen until year 3 and year 4. So we're really going to find out what kind of a football coach and what kind of a CEO of his business, really, because that's what it is. What kind of CEO Ed Orgeron is there? Nick Saban's been able to do it. Kirby Smart's proved that he can go out and recycle a staff. So we'll see what Ed Orgeron can do there. I think a lot of questions left to be unanswered for the national defending champs. On to number Georgia. On to number 6, the University of Georgia. Sorry, man. It is a late night here. It is 10:10 here on the East Coast. Obviously, you guys tuning in, we appreciate you for staying up with us. But I just got off the basketball court, Zach. I was just getting done. I'm talking about dropping buckets. 2-4 was with me tonight. On to number 6, the University of Georgia, 12-2 last season, Zach. And they lose a handful of really key contributors, most importantly, Jake Fromm at the quarterback position. You had a good opportunity to watch Jake over the last 3 years. What do they lose? I know what they lose. What do they lose in Jake Fromm, in your opinion, Zach?
Well, before I get to my opinion, like you said, like it depends on who you ask. What is Georgia losing in Jake Fromm? And not only are they losing a guy that you and I have both talked about is, yeah, he might not have the flashiest arm. Yeah, he might not do the flashiest things on the field, but the dude's got it up here. And that's what Georgia has loved at quarterback. That's what a lot of teams love at their quarterback. That's what the guys that have won the Super Bowl 6 times in the past 20 years have loved in their quarterback, is guys who have the smarts. That's your fit, by the way, for Jake Fromm at the next level.
Yeah.
So, you know,
he's talking about the Patriots for all of those that didn't pick up all those innuendos. Go ahead,
yeah,
Zach.
I'm a former NFL guy here. But I mean, you know, that's going to hurt a lot more than fans might want to accept. And it, you know, we're going to have to see how Georgia rebounds. Like I said, Kirby Smart's probably the only guy close to Nick Saban that's proven that he, you know, as an elite recruiter, as a guy that can, you know, be hurt by losing Sam Pittman, a key member of your staff, only to replace him with Matt Luke. That's perfect. Like that's a great way to do it. He's the only guy in the conference under Nick Saban that I think is confident of consistently being able to do that. And we'll see what his approach is to doing that with Fromm, bringing in Todd Monken and Jamie Newman and letting Monken develop Carson Beck, a guy that he has familiarity with growing up in Jacksonville. You know, like this is possibly a new look for Georgia's offense, the way that they're embracing it. The loss of Jake Fromm and transitioning potentially into a new look style of offense that we haven't seen out of them recently, with a mind like Monken in the building. And obviously this isn't confirmed or anything by me. I'm just an outsider here, but with my
pretty much Zach, I can pretty much guarantee. But I mean, just look at the track record of what he's done. He recruited the wide receiver position better in the year 2020 than pretty much any coach has ever done at the University of Georgia. He goes out and hires Todd Monken, lets his former OC and one of his buddies in James Coley step down, gives him a demotion, pays Todd Monken what he's paying, just over a little bit over $1 million or so to be the offensive coordinator here at the University of Georgia, and then brings on Buster Faulkner. All indications that he is moving to a full-on air raid system. Now, I don't know if the University of Georgia is ever going to come out and throw the football 45 times. And I guarantee you they will not lose that physical nature and physical brand of football that Kirby Smart has grown up knowing and playing. But what I can tell you is he's not the type of individual that's so hard-headed that not only is he going to go out and bring these guys in, but he's going to bring them in and not allow them to do what they are brought in and hired to do. He's going to let them, decide what they're going to do. And look, Todd Monken's not a guy that's just shown to run 5 wide every time. He ran three tight ends at Tampa Bay. He ran 12 personnel, 38% of the time in Cleveland last year. So this is a guy who's not, he's a personnel driven play caller. And I think that's exactly what Georgia needed and that's what you need in the college ranks, because like we're going to see at LSU right now, they had the personnel to run 5 wide last year. They had 3 great receivers and a great tight end and a ball catching back out of the backfield. Are they going to have that personnel this year? No. And are they going to have the offensive coordinator to do it? No. You better have an offensive coordinator that can be diversified within your personnel. My first question and only question really about the offense heading into 2020, I think Jamie Newman's going to be great under Todd Monken. I think he's going to have more weapons, like I said, than Georgia's really had in quite some time at the wide receiver position, and in particular, the tight end position. My God, Trey McKitty and Darnell Washington at tight end. You talk about an upgrade athletically from Charlie Warner and Eli Wolf. I mean, holy smokes, night and day, quite literally. But back to what I'm talking about, they're going to throw the ball a lot more. But I'm more concerned about that offensive line. You lose 115 starts off your offensive line, whether it be to the NFL draft in 3 of the cases, and 1 of the cases to a transfer who we're going to talk about a little bit later. But I think 6 is a comfortable guess. All these people that think Georgia's in a rebuilding year, you haven't been paying attention to what they're doing recruiting-wise. You don't rebuild when you're in the top 3 and top 4 in recruiting rankings year in and year out. So 6, I think, is a firm hold. Zach, on to number 7, onto your domain right here with the Florida Gators. Give us the rundown. Who are they losing? Who are they bringing in? And there's a lot of optimism based off that schedule, I'm led to believe.
Oh, there's absolutely. I mean, this is one of the easier schedules that they've had in a while, and there's no reason for them to not hit their next goal. Dan Mullen has been incredibly goal-oriented since getting here to Florida. He came in, he wanted to win 10 games. Next year, it was all about going from 10 to 11. Well, next is going to be 11 to 12, and that means competing for the playoffs, and that's what he wants to do. He's been gifted an incredibly easy schedule to do it this year. What's going to be the biggest thing, minus, there's recruiting, everything like that. People have had questions about Dan Mullen's recruiting. As of right now, this is the best class that he's had in a while. We'll see whether or not that class makes a big impact on this upcoming year. But at the end of the day, what's going to be really key is how Kyle Trask looks entering the season as a starter. He's not going, it's not something he's used to. He entered midway through the year this year, took over. Florida went to an Orange Bowl and he did really well. Well, what about when defenses start getting used to it? What he's able to do well, because he is a bit limited. He's a game manager. He's a West Coast quarterback. And there's guys like that who will thrive for a very long time. I just mentioned it with Jake Fromm. He's a guy that did it incredibly well. Mm-hmm. But, there's a reason Kyle Trask didn't start for 7 years. And there's a reason that Felipe Franks started over him. So now with him in the position as QB1, unless Emory Jones, the Georgia guy himself, comes in and is able to take that position from him, we're going to have to see if he's able to overcome, a very hit or miss offensive line, better in pass protection than run blocking, but the run blocking it just made it a non-factor. Will the run game be able to take a step up to take a little bit of weight off his shoulders? Will losing 4 senior receivers who split starts as a leadership factor hurt Kyle Trask as much as it could have? In a type of quarterback like him depends on the play of his skill players. So it's going to be a lot of loss for him. Now they've added some guys to come in and, help relieve some of those losses, but will it be enough for Kyle Trask to grow in his final year of college football? That's yet to be seen.
Yeah, one question that's also yet to be answered there at the University of Florida, and for the better part of Dan Mullen's career, is can he produce a productive run game without a running threat at the quarterback position? That's one thing I've noticed about the Dan Mullen offense. It's highly predicated about having a quarterback that can keep the end man on the defensive line of scrimmage at bay and keep them responsible for a quarterback keep. If Kyle Trask is never going to do that, I don't ever see Florida being able to produce on the ground. And it's something we've even seen them do with Trask at quarterback. Why else would you run Emory Jones in there for design quarterback runs 3 or 4 times a game, and some in crucial situations? I mean, they're dependent upon, or at least his offensive system is dependent upon having a mobile quarterback. And I just don't know if that question's ever going to be answered with Kyle Trask. But to be quite honest, all it's going to take is 1 or 2 keeps. Let's talk about this running back situation, though. You lose LaMichael Pirine, a guy who's been a mainstay in that backfield there in Florida for quite some time. Who's the guy up next? Who's going to be the next Florida running back?
Well, I think a lot depends on the waiver process for Miami transfer former 5-star Lorenzo Lingard. If he's able to get cleared immediately with the potential health issues coming up in his family, then that's great. That's just a cherry on top at this point, but you can't bank on that until that's official. So for right now, it's Dameon Pierce. He's going to be a rising junior. He split carries a bit with Pirine this past year, had over 400 rushing yards as a freshman. He's a guy that's more of a traditional bruiser. He's more of a power guy. He's got some work to do as a receiver, though. He showed a little bit of growth in that area last year. Still a lot of work to do as a pass protector. He's not as well-rounded as Pirine was at the end of his career. But in my opinion, last year when they were trying to get the run game going, it looked a lot better when Pierce was in there because he was consistently able to churn out an extra yard or two at the end of runs. One cutback too. Oh yeah, exactly. And he's going to, I think he'll show a lot more growth. He lost a little weight last year. He looked faster, but it was the same story with Pirine. Like you really couldn't tell what that run game was out of those running backs with the run blocking that was ahead of them. So that's why there was so much emphasis on the offensive line in this recruiting cycle. There's going to be a huge expectation for just a jump in skill from all 5 of the guys on that line under Coach Hevesy. Luckily for him, they returned 4 starters, unlike the year prior where they lost 4 starters. So it's really unseen for now, but as things stand, Dameon Pierce is the guy, and they're going to have to hope that he shows a lot of growth in the passing game.
So just to, take a little jab here at the University of Florida. Now at a 5-star count, I think we're at 3, right? Brenton Cox, the tailback from Miami, and now Gervon Dexter, the new incoming guy in 2020. Is that correct? 2 of which are transfers.
Correct.
Yeah, I think Georgia finished with 3 in the 2020 class. So, hey, we can't all be winners in the recruiting world. Kirby Smart seems to be a winner. But you know what? Dan Mullen seems to have the schematic advantage. I will say that. I mean, we'll see what Todd Monken can do. But if you were to match the wits of Dan Mullen on offense versus the wits of Kirby Smart on defense, not looking at the scores of the last 3 or the last 2 football games between the 2 head coaches, obviously, because that's been a smoke show. But if you were to just look at their schematics, I think in the college football world, Dan Mullen's a little higher regarded in terms of offensive schematics and offensive schemes than Kirby is defensively. Kirby's known for his recruiting, and for a good reason. And his defense comes second. He is a great defensive coach. Obviously, they had the nation's top defense last year. Let's move on from Florida, though, on to Texas A&M. And I will be directly honest with you right now, Zach. I mean, Cole Thompson is a friend of the show. He's on here quite often, our Aggie maven over there on SI.com. But I'm not buying this Texas A&M hype. Look, I know the crossover games are really easy. I know you get Vanderbilt and South Carolina. That's all fine and dandy. But look, you're still in the SEC West. I think that's clear and as obvious as can be. All right. I mean, but you still got to play Alabama. You still got to play LSU year in and year out. Is LSU going to take that much of a step back to where Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher can hop in there? And if you want to be direct and honest and 100% right now, go look at Jimbo's record without Jameis Winston as his starting quarterback and tell me what you really think about Jimbo Fisher as a head coach, and then come back to me. I know he has a national championship, but I know that 13 Florida State team, that was one of the best football teams I've ever seen at the college level 14-0 states it. And they walked through the playoff rankings too. Jameis Winston was hands down the best player in college football at that point. And let's be honest, it doesn't take a genius to do that. Gene Chizik did the same thing riding Cam Newton. So not saying Jimbo Fisher is Gene Chizik. I respect him a lot more than that, especially as an offensive coordinator. But I'm not here for all this, oh, Jimbo Fisher makes 10 mil, so write him in for 10 wins. What say you, Zach Goodall?
Well, I mean, take a look at what FSU was when Jimbo left. It's not like he left something perfect for Willie Taggart to come and inherit either. There's certainly pluses and minuses when it comes to Jimbo Fisher, and a lot of people can tout these fantastic years that they have on their resume. It'll change everyone's entire outlook on you. To me, when it comes down to Texas A&M at this point is, what are you getting in Kellen Mond? Are you getting 10 for 30 for 92 and 3 picks like he threw against LSU? Are you getting 20 for 28 like he threw against Lamar of all teams? Are you getting the 17 of 23 for 234 and 3 touchdowns against Mississippi State? Like what are you getting in him? And at this point, entering what will be his final year, there's plenty of reason to have a lot of concern as to whether or not you're going to see that type of growth. He's been on the field a good amount. They're putting more and more around him. They've got the coaching there. That's great. You got to prove it at some point.
Yeah, I think, to some extent, I mean, they both wear 11, but to some extent, the situations were very, very similar between Kellen Mond and Jake Fromm. Obviously, Jake Fromm, the much better football player, in my opinion. But at this point in their career, Kellen Mond entering his senior year, he is what he is at this point as a quarterback. And I think that had a lot to do. The same thing with Jake Fromm. And I think that had a lot to do with Fromm's decision to enter the draft early. He's got a draftable grade. He's got a 2 to 4th round draft grade right now as the quarterback. You take that if you know your ceiling is maxed out. Kellen Mond's draft grade right now, 5th to probably 7th round, if he's even drafted at all at this point, I believe. So, I don't think there's, you're not going to see any type of junior to senior year progression like you saw with Joe Burrow this past year. I can tell you that right now. But you're probably going to get the same type of football player, a guy that's going to rack up the stats. But when it comes to high-pressured football, when they go at the end of the year this year and they have to finish against LSU and Alabama in back-to-back football games, what is Kellen Mond going to look like at that point? I think that's the question that A&M is going to have to get over, and that's the hurdle, right? It's what I opened my argument with here. A&M still in the West, still got to go through the Kings of the West. Let's get on to another team here in the West, in the Auburn Tigers. Look, a football team that finished strong last year with a hard-fought Iron Bowl, and then to go out there in the in the bowl game. I think they lost the bowl game. Did they not, Zach?
I'm actually pulling that up right now.
I think Minnesota beat them. Did they not? Check that for me.
Keep going. I got you.
But anyways, what I'm saying, you lose a bunch of defensive linemen, right?
Sorry. Yes, Minnesota did beat them.
Okay, so you lose a nail biter in that bowl game, but how about kudos to Gus Malzahn's culture. You get Derek Brown to play in his final game there at Auburn, despite being a top 5 consensus, top 10 overall draft pick. Okay, those are all great things, but you lose a ton defensively. You lose 2 corners. You lose all 3 of your best defensive linemen. Big Cat Bryant, I believe, is coming back. Check me on that one too while you're over there with the Google machine there, Zach Goodall. I do not believe Big Cat Bryant declared early for the draft. So you're going to get that guy back. Owen Papo, one of the best young linebackers, you're going to have him defensively. Now, I'm a firm believer, and I am here in the camp of Bo Nix, and for this one reason. He can run that Gus Malzahn offense. That is pride and proven. And one thing you can say about the freshman quarterback, look, he played 5 top 10 opponents this year, and he had his team within 1 score within 10 minutes left in the 4th quarter. So say what you want about that young quarterback. Say about how he played trash and his numbers are awful. And he had 7 picks in 3 games alone against Oregon, LSU, and I believe not Alabama. Anyways, 3 picks in 3 of the biggest games. Florida threw 2 picks against Florida, I believe, as well. So lit it up against the teams that weren't necessarily highly qualified and highly ranked, and didn't play so great against the top opponents. But what do you expect from a true freshman? Especially at the quarterback position. I think it weighs a ton for me that young man kept those guys in that football game, in all of those football games, and came out, with a respectful 9-4 record. I'm a big Bo Nix believer moving forward. What say you, Zach Goodall?
See, I'm hit or miss on what I think Bo is going to become, because there were a lot of ups, there were a lot of downs. That was clear.
Yeah.
In 8 of his 13 games as a freshman starting all year in the SEC, he completed over 60% of his passes. Like, there are just numbers you got to look at, and you see like that's going to translate, and he's very obviously going to keep growing. That's going to be, the biggest point of Auburn's offseason, number 1 and number 2 and number 3. Like, he's going to be the leader of this team. He's been the leader of this team since he stepped onto campus at this point. That's how they regard him. And like you said, the losses on defense, having a great defense can carry a bit of an inconsistent young quarterback while they get their groove. Well, now Nix is going to be expected to take a big leap, losing a lot of veteran presence. Is it going to be too much for him? We'll see, but he's got a good mind. He's got a great place. He's got a place that believes in him. And that's one of the most important aspects of being a young quarterback in college football, is having a system around you that believes in you. So Bo Nix is going to have every opportunity to keep growing.
Yeah, and how about a coach that's always going to protect you? I mean, when Gus Malzahn, for Christ's sake, Gus Malzahn went to a college football playoff with Nick Marshall as his quarterback. If that tells you anything about what Gus Malzahn can do offensively, if that doesn't tell you, anything about what Gus Malzahn can do offensively, I don't know what ever will. But let's move on from Auburn to our final team of the night, and a bit of a shocker to some people, even though if you followed what they did to close out the season with 6 straight wins, it might not be as much of a surprise to you. But the Tennessee Volunteers, Zach, coming in at 25th. Now, here's the thing about Tennessee. They've gotten dog stomped by the 2 biggest teams in the SEC over the last, decade and a half. In fact, Florida's won 14 out of the last 15 against Tennessee. I'm sure you knew that, Zach. Georgia has, pretty much manhandled them, apart from the Hail Mary in Athens there in 2016. What do you think about the 2020 Tennessee Volunteers? And what do you think about that offensive line, and whether or not Cade Mays is going to get his, eligibility and win his appeal?
Well, see, I always try and refrain from making a judgment on if it's going to happen. It's kind of like when I covered the NFL, people would always say, oh yeah, like this guy's totally going to renegotiate his contract. And while it might be the smartest thing for both sides, like I always wait until that's pen to paper. But there's no doubt Cade Mays stepping onto the field whenever it's time for him to do it in the orange and white plaid, or like he's going to change that offensive line just as soon as he gets out there. Potential help of maybe adding a guy like Zach Evans in this class. There's obviously the rumors all going around of where he's going to end up at, because Tennessee does love to have a really good running back on their roster. Sometimes they don't know what to do with it, like Alvin Kamara, like John Kelly, but they do love to have a good running back on their roster, and they can string together moments of like 6 straight wins after what was just a hysterical, laughing stock start to their season. So we'll have to see. I don't buy any top 25 hype for Tennessee right now, but I've been known to make mistakes from time to time. Maybe they'll come out and surprise us.
Fair enough. And I mean, talk about the offensive line. 4-star, 5-star Wanye Morris, the top tackle in the 2018 class, excuse me. He'll be nice and seasoned after starting a full freshman year. Trey Smith coming back for his senior year at Tennessee. And Darnell Wright, another 5-star tackle there at the right tackle position. So they're going to be stacked, and then potentially add in Cade Mays. And like you said, don't like to make any assumptions about guys' eligibility and whether or not they'll be ready and available come, the first week of the season. But I'm not here for this Tennessee hype either. The 2 teams I don't really buy of these 7 that we've talked about tonight. 2.5. Let's give LSU the credit for what they did. Don't think it's going to be a swan song, if you will, in 2020. Yeah. I don't think it's going to be a parade throughout the rest of the year. And I don't know if it's going to be a 10-win season there, but the SEC West seems to be a little bit down with Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach, still getting their feet wet in the SEC. Hell, Mike Leach hadn't even filled out his staff yet. All he's hired is a 34-year-old defensive coordinator that's coming from the Big Ten. So I don't know what the SEC West is going to look like this year. But what I do know is that the SEC East is going to continue to move upward. Georgia's trending upward. Florida's trending upward. And again, say what you want about Georgia being in a rebuild. That ain't happening Not in my opinion. It doesn't happen at Clemson. It doesn't happen at Florida. It doesn't really happen, for that matter, at LSU, and it damn sure don't happen at Ohio State. What do all of these schools have in common? They're constantly resting in the top 5 in recruiting. Look, it's a Jimmy's and Joe's game in college football. If you got the best Jimmy's and the best Joe's, you don't exactly need the best X's and O's. So I think that is kind of what's going to happen there. I don't think Tennessee's quite got the Jimmy's and the Joe's quite yet. So we'll see. I do think, though, it's leaning that way, but they're going to have to start taking gambles on guys like Zach Evans. You're going to have to start, foregoing any, more morality questions or locker room issues you might have. And by God, when they get there, you're going to have to play them and play them early. And that's what it is. Zach, I really want to appreciate you for joining us on tonight's show. Tell the people how they can find all your great work there on social media and, of course, over on the Gator Maven.
Well, if you're a Gator fan, you got to go ahead and make sure to check out Gator Maven. You can find us at si.com/college/Florida. And if you want to follow me on Twitter for bad tweets about the Jaguars, Gators, hip hop, and more, follow me at Zach_Goodall. That's Zach spelled the correct way with an H.
Let me put that up on the screen for you. We'll put it down there on the bottom. How about this fancy software? Boom. Check that out. Zach spelled the right way with a CH_Goodall. Zach, man, I appreciate you again for coming on here on SEC Nightly. And as always, you are always welcome here on the television broadcast, my man.
Let's make it happen again soon.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is our show for tonight. However, wherever you found tonight's show, again, this is SEC Nightly. We do this Monday through Friday, typically starting at 9 p.m., unless I got buckets to give on the basketball court, which I did tonight, unfortunately. And, man, it was a free range show tonight. I'm telling you, free range all over the court. As soon as I stepped inside half court, it was wet. Anyways, if that happens, maybe on Tuesday nights, we might have to slide this back to 10 p.m., which is the case tonight. Those of you that did tune in, I appreciate you for staying up late and grabbing it with us. Again, like, subscribe, rate, review, do all that stuff, whether you found it on YouTube, Periscope, Facebook, or you listening to it on a traditional podcast over there on Spotify, almost said Spattle. Spotify and Apple. I had way too much coffee before we started this live broadcast. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. Follow the show on Twitter at SEC Nightly. Follow me on Twitter at BrooksAustinSI. We'll appreciate you guys. We will see you tomorrow night at our regular scheduled programming time at 9 p.m. Thank you guys for tuning in. This has been SEC Nightly. I'm your host, Brooks Austin. We'll see you tomorrow. Deuces.